man himself then. Professor Betts, welcome onto the show. Thank you for coming. You're a professor of war and conflict studies in the modern era, and I think some of your thinking here is absolutely fascinating. Let's start off with an easy one. You've made the suggestion that the UK is starting to resemble the term failed state, which is something that is normally applied to overseas foreign countries. Would you just give a quick word on that and say what things, following from what Tim himself was saying as an analysis on your work, in your own words, what would you point to justify that conclusion?
So my point is that Britain today exhibits all the standard warning signals of a country which is vulnerable to the outbreak of civil war. There are fundamentally three that are important. These are structural and long-term. They don't emerge, they haven't simply emerged recently. They've been building for a long time. The first is the factionalization of the society, which is increasingly of a type which is known in the literature as polar factionalization, where people are not disagreeing on issues per se; they're essentially differing in accordance with what they think is the consensus view of their tribe. And this is a form of factionalism which only occurs when people are beginning to feel unsafe. It's a reflection of a perception of insecurity in society that makes people wish to look to their tribe for security. The second factor is a perception on the part of a formerly dominant majority that they are losing their status in society, that they are trending either towards a minority, trending ultimately to a minority status in their own society. And that tends to be a very, that is a very significant predictor of civil conflict. And that basically is the situation throughout much of the Western world, particularly in Western Europe, and increasingly so in the UK. The third factor is essentially a loss of faith in the functioning of the normal, legitimate system. When people lose faith in the ability to solve collective action problems through normal political means, they then seek alternate means of achieving change. Those alternate means can vary in type, but it is very likely, in my view, that will take the shape of some sort of civil conflict in the UK. On top of those factors, we need to be. There are some more proximate issues. These would include the looming, essentially the long-standing expectation gap particularly amongst youth who have poorer economic prospects, lower levels of security, in fact, possibly even diminishing expectations of lifespan and health and so on in society, less opportunities to own homes, procreate, and so on. This is an expectation gap that derives from structural economic problems in society that have been building for a long time, that are likely to come to a crunch point here in the UK, probably in the next 6 months. Given I'm not an economist, but I think that's a fairly reasonable view, certainly widely expressed economic viewpoint, and another proximate factor hinted at by Tim Stanley there is the lack of a unified and competent elite in the UK. The government is simply not terribly competent. They don't know what they are doing. They are reacting in a highly capricious manner, as essentially as frightened people do when they themselves are fearful of the monster that they've created and they can see arising. And so you have a situation now where the elite is already beginning to is not competent, but is also beginning to fracture. So you're seeing defections from the elite across the political spectrum, which results, for instance, in the rise of anti-status quo parties, a multitude of them now. So these combination of factors, I would just stress, are long-term. They haven't come from nowhere. They've been building for a long while, but they're really now coming to the boiling point. And we are seeing we're seeing that they are coming to a boiling point in the headlines, in a range of headlines today, some of which Tim had already hinted at, but we can get into further.
I'll give way to Tim in just a moment, but I want to respond to one of the many things that you mentioned. Really, we could spend all day picking the chapter headings that you listed, because they're certainly serious enough to deserve that. But this idea that a formerly dominant social majority, fearing that it's in danger of losing that dominance, there's a term, a concept in geopolitics, which Steve Bannon talks about all the time on this show, the Thucydides trap, which is really applied to regional hegemons. And the theory is this, that when you have a rising power and a declining power, there's the friction of that normally creates war, as the declining power tries to maintain its dominance. I don't want to put words into your mouth, which is why I'm going to ask you the question. Would it be an inauthentic interpretation of what you were saying to suggest that there is a similar sort of dynamic, or there may be a similar sort of dynamic taking place within a nation itself? This isn't two regional hegemons, but perhaps in the geopolitical sense, but perhaps cultural hegemons, as a historic predominant force in the UK wanes and is overtaken within the same territory of the UK by another force. That might also lead to tension and war. Would that be an authentic way of synthesizing what you were just saying?
I have no problems with that. With putting it that way. I mean, I don't tend to employ the Thucydides trap in my own work. It's usually, as you point out, it's usually used in the context of international relations rather than with the politics that are internal to a particular nation. But the phenomenon you describe, I think, is or the idea is perfectly portable into the context of a domestic situation, and in fact is so that's perfectly reasonable. What you have is a situation where a group fears that it is losing control, and moreover, they fear that they are doing so imminently, which powers a certain sense of urgency to act while they have the wherewithal to do so. That ultimately is, I think, a reasonable way of paraphrasing the Thucydides trap, and it's also essentially the narrative that surrounds the what popularly is referred to as the Great Replacement or replacement theory, or to be honest, often is described as conspiracy, as a way of kind of assuming that's about trying to explain it away. But within the Civil Wars literature, it's referred to by the term downgrading, which is effectively an academic way of explaining the same concept, the same words applied essentially to the same phenomenon.
The tensions are homegrown and domestic to the UK. Would you mind, just in your own words, say a little bit about your reaction of the I don't want to use the word because you haven't used the word of Russophobia, but the idea of casting this external threat into a place where it really isn't appropriate to do so. Give me a few words, if you wouldn't mind, on that, please.
I think what you're alluding to is the possibility that what the UK government and other European governments are now doing is resorting to a time-honored political gambit, which is presenting the public with an external threat. When governments perceive there to be a significant domestic threat to the security of the regime, to kind of when there is a significant domestic turmoil, it can be very helpful to call on the nation to unify, and in that case, having an external threat, an outgroup on which to concentrate people's attention, can have a unifying effect. This is a very time-honored political technique. It's normally referred to as the short victorious war theory, which dates back to the early 19th century, when a Tsarist advisor suggested to the Tsar that a short victorious war with Japan would be very useful in terms of quelling, building domestic turmoil within the Russian polity. So one of the explanations, in other words, for the Russo-Japanese War is essentially a reaction on the part of the Russian authorities to their perception of the looming danger of civil conflict, which was a valid and appropriate concern on their part. That's where the term comes from, but it's a time-honored technique. Now, I'm not in government. I don't sit in cabinet, so I can't say that they're doing that, but it's very logical, plausibly that a government that is under significant domestic pressure uses external threat to deflect. That is undoubtedly what happened in the early days of the Russo-Ukraine War, with Boris Johnson's intervention in that conflict, which occurred at a time of his maximum domestic political trouble. So that's, I'll admit, that's a matter of speculation on my part. As I said, I'm not sitting in cabinet, but I'd be very surprised if astute political operators in the UK were not aware of this time-honored political technique and using it very adroitly, it must be said.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, arguably, you could suggest that nations around the world use the short victorious war device to lock us all down during COVID. Given that, no doubt there will be a similar infringement on our personal liberties, I would hope that the government would correctly identify external threats to social well-being in the UK. And it would seem to me to be somewhat perverse it's not just the present government, right? It's a succession of British governments that they've allowed this threat to social stability to arise, and now they're suggesting to look elsewhere for the blame. 30 seconds. Professor Betts, where can people go on social media to keep up with your research? And I hope we'll get you back on the show soon.
Well, I'd be happy to come back. As for social media, people can search me up. I'm easy to find on David Betts. I don't need internet fame, so find me. Search on Twitter for a guy with a pipe by the name David Betts.
So there you are. That's a pretty interesting scenario, talking about, and some experts are predicting, the possibility of civil war. I don't know about that. One guy who would have more of an insight into whether there would be possibly and as some experts are predicting, the possibility of a civil war in the UK. Trevor Coult MC, thanks for joining us. Do you see a possibility, understanding what war is all about, do you see a possibility of civil war in the UK?
Wow, great question, Mike. First of all, thank you for having me on your show again. It's always wonderful to debate with professionals. I I'm baffled what's going on. Could there be a civil war here? There's a possibility. The police are being very heavy-handed towards ordinary protesters. I've seen videos, I've had loads of things sent to me, and I've been watching how the UK Metropolitan Police behave. And I have seen ordinary people with flags, whether it's the St George's flag or whether it is the Union flag, being heavy-handed, abused, and having the flag ripped off them. I watched a police officer yesterday in the Metropolitan Police crumple up a Union flag into his fist and throw it in the back of a police wagon. At the same time, to the left of the shot, was people flying the Palestinian flags, and they were allowed to freely fly them. So I can see something happening. I make it quite clear that I would never endorse violence, but I'm telling you now, Mike, if I was to see a police officer heavy hand a female or someone young and abuse them, I would step in and grip them. People need to stand up for themselves. Just because you wear a police uniform doesn't give you the right to abuse ordinary citizens that are protesting that they don't like what's going on with their government. We're seeing it happen daily here. The police force, especially the London, the Met, they are abusing ordinary citizens and they're getting away with it. And people do need to stand up to them.
What do you think was wrong with the authority these days in the UK? We have authority for one group and then we have no authority for the other group. The other group can do exactly the same as the ones that have the authority. And so therefore those citizens are, I'd probably say, victimised. Then you have government quite draconian in its attitude. You have a pretty miserable time at the moment in the UK. Does it get back to government? Does it get back to the government being so weak, so so divisive within their own selves? Because they know they should be looking after your citizens. But what they're doing is they're dividing the citizens and creating opportunities for those that have popped into the UK illegally. What do you think?
Well, Mike, I don't see that we have a government. We have a dictatorship. Now, you've got to bear in mind that our current Prime Minister, who I call the crime minister, is not doing a good job. It's terrible. I mean, this so-called government are at a 27-year high in spending and borrowing. They're giving away our money hand over fist to people that have never added any value or paid taxes in the UK. They've put ordinary working people at the back of the housing list. Like 1.9 million people now are waiting to get houses, and they are at the back of the list compared to people that are arriving over. We have seen in the last couple of days, £300,000 brand new houses being given out to and I'm going to say it, fake asylum seekers. It just seems now that we have too many human rights lawyers which are waiting at the border to get their free government money and their expenses by taking on illegals and putting them down as asylum seekers. Our government are not a government. We currently have, now let's not forget that our Prime Minister for a long time there couldn't even explain what a woman was. And he hired Roger Hemer as the Attorney General, who spent years and years advising the leader of a terrorist organisation how to beat the British. And that's the guy now in charge of our legal system. So we don't have a government which is looking after UK citizens. We currently have a regime which is dictating what we can and can't say. And if we do speak out of line and we criticise it, criticising something that's going wrong is now classed as a hate speech. We have a police force up and down the country which are taking a knee to a terrorist sympathiser that's currently occupied number 10.
I'll play you this. This is just a short clip on what someone surmised that a civil war would look like.
Do you think we're headed for a civil war?
The form that it will take, it will look something like something is seriously wrong in this country. There's a real rot, a real sickness in our societies that I think requires radical action. If we don't change the trajectory that we're on, I think things are going to get really bad.
Where does that lead us?
The only future we have is one of which I think will inevitably spill over into violence. Is it reasonable to bring in huge numbers of people from the most violent regions of the world who think in a tribalistic way, who organise around their identity? The English specifically are very individualistically minded. The English are at a structural disadvantage. This project has failed. It doesn't work.
So do you think there's some clips there of what he thought war or civil war may look like. Would it be like that or worse?
I think it'll be a lot worse, Mike, to be honest. The police have lost control. They're not policing us anymore. They've taken the side of the aggressor, and the police play a very cunning game. Whenever you're in London and you're protesting, what the police do is they're really heavy-handed at peaceful protesters. But when you have Palestinians, or you have or Syrian, or you have Stop the War, or you have an aggressive protest, the police are very cowardly. They would stand back and they don't want to intervene. I mean, have you seen the police yet go into a Palestinian protest and take away a Palestinian flag? It's not happened yet. But they'll gladly do it to peaceful protesters, and they have pushed the public far too far. I am currently waiting, because I'm being ignored by my local member of parliament. Jenny Riddle-Carpenter is my local Labour MP. Didn't vote for her, but unfortunately I got her. And she isn't really taking any calls at the minute, is she? I mean, a lot of Labour constituencies have sort of closed their doors to the public because they know that there is a lot of people that are angry with them. The only thing that we can do is, which I doubt is going to happen, because we have a really weak waste of space oxygen thief as a king. We can't really get him to do anything. I mean, what I'm going to be honest with you, it's times that guess I start to wonder, what is the point in having a monarchy? You know, the king is meant to reign over us. We are his subjects, and he has the power to dissolve Parliament when he sees this happening. I'm sure the king's not that stupid. I'm sure he can see that what's happening with the current government spending, the billions and trillions in debt, the spiraling out of what's happened to your communities, going into poverty to house people in luxury. I mean, he's not stupid, is he? I mean, for a king, he has the power to fix this. And I don't see the royal family, and people will say they never get involved in politics, but it's about time they bloody did. I mean, he is the king. What is the point of him? I mean, I get really, really angry at the fact that the UK has fallen into so disgruntled and an unhappy place to live. Taxes are through the roof. Nobody wants to live here. I mean, they're going into our savings. They want to introduce digital ID. This is possibly how they're going to do it now. But if they do introduce digital ID, some people will be exempt from it, won't they? Fake asylum seekers will be exempt digital ID, won't they?
The government doesn't seem to be panicking, though. I mean, the ministers seem to be quite relaxed almost, not panicking at all. How do you see it?
Well, I think I see the same, but hopefully everyone else is seeing the same thing here. I'm seeing a Labour Party MP. But now let's not forget, in the last year since Keir Starmer took over, 13 of his front bench MPs have had to either resign or get sacked or suspended because of their attitude. I mean, they had an anti-corruption MP who was caught in corruption. I mean, a health minister that was abusing the system. We have a woman in charge of the deputy prime minister, who's currently we have a guy known as Two Jags. Remember, we now have Rayner known as Three Houses. You know, and we see. I mean, she's dressing like Elton John in her designer glasses and her fluorescent clothing now. I mean, she's taking the piss out of the working people. I don't think the Labour Party care. It's very clear they really don't care.
Do you think the government, another thought is that the government doesn't really know how to govern? What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, we have a guy who is in charge of Number 10, who used to be the Attorney General, who ignored all the rape and grooming gangs and thought Jimmy Savile was a great guy. So, I mean, he's now in charge of the country, and he's handed the country to our enemies, let's be honest. I mean, I served in Afghanistan. I don't want to bring up my army career because, you know, it's done and dusted. But whenever we worked in Afghanistan, I mean, I know for a fact, because I worked with the Intelligence Exploitation Force, we employed just under 6,000 locally employed contractors, LECs, Afghans. And so far, our government's housed nearly 100,000 of them. I mean, the figures don't even add up. I mean, we have had veterans evicted from military housing and replaced with Afghans under the Afghan resettlement scheme. We have turned our back on the people that protected us. I mean, the UK is a laughing stock now. I mean, it's the talk of the world, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's hard to really work out who's the dictator here? The guy in charge of North Korea or the guy in charge of the UK that wants to silence mainstream media, who's got a secret unit now which trolls social media. I knew during COVID that the MOD had put together a unit called 7-7 Brigade, which is a psychological unit that's job was to go after and destroy people's reputations that they thought were a threat to the government. And they did a very good job of destroying people online.
If there was unrest that sort of led towards a civil war, and again, many people are saying, it won't happen. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, he believes there won't be a civil war. But because he said basically they're going to be slippery and slimy enough to weasel their way out of it. But if there was, the conflict grew and people decided to say, we've had enough, is the army capable of controlling things and understanding that they're not fighting in Afghanistan or fighting in Ukraine or whatever, they're actually fighting in their own borders?
Well, first of all, I hope there's not a civil war. I really do. When it comes to the UK military, no, I don't think they're capable anymore. I've seen how they behave. I know a lot of the commanders in there now, and to be honest, I don't think the British Army would do this. I mean, if we go back to the Northern Ireland days, patrolling and rioting, it could be that. It could be rioting. It could be, the soldiers out on the flanks trying to stop and push people back. There could be curfews put in place at night time to keep people off the streets. But hand on heart, I don't ever see the British Army turning on the people. What I can see is the people at the top of the army, the generals, turning on the politicians and saying no. At the end of the day, the politicians may think they control the British Army, but it's all quite clear that it's the generals at the top that do, and they make the decisions. And if they don't want to put the soldiers out on the streets, a decision will be made at top level not to do it. So Keir Starmer's at a very difficult point at the minute. I mean, it would be best if he resigned, but if he did resign, we'd end up with Angela Rayner, who's taking the piss out of us all. So I would like to see maybe Parliament suspended and a general election, because this can't go on, Mike.
But they're not going to have an election, are they? Because they know at this stage you'd pick anybody except the government. So they're going to really stretch it out, I think, to about 2029. That's what I think. But then you look at the opposition. You really haven't got much of an opposition. You've got, what's his name? The Reform Party. You got them with Jerry Springfield. That's what it's like. I mean, it's you really haven't got any opposition at the moment, and if you haven't got opposition in against government within the confines of Parliament, then government can do what it likes.
Well, yeah, we do have Kemi Badenoch. I hope I pronounced that right. Kemi Badenoch, who's the opposition leader, and it's weird how the Conservative Party have basically vanished. They basically vanished. I mean, they're nothing now. I mean, we don't have an opposition, as you just stated, but it seems that the opposition at the minute does seem to be the Reform Party. I have spoken to I have spoke to Richard Tice in the past, and he is a really, really clever businessman, and probably not as well a good politician as he is in business. But at the end of the day, do we really need to have people that are great at politics running the country? We've proven, I mean, time and time again, that these politicians don't know what they're doing. I mean, they come straight off. I mean, look at Rachel Thieves, as I call her. Look at her as the Chancellor. I mean, she came straight off the hotline, working in the reception at a bank, to now running the country's finances, and she's run us into the gutter. I mean, so do we need people that are qualified in position roles? We probably do. It's about time we stop just giving people off the street to get elected. Stop putting them in charge of multi-billion-pound corporations and running the country, because they don't know what they're doing. They clearly don't. So maybe the Reform Party deserve a chance. It's quite clear that Labour and Conservative have been at each other's heels from the year dot. And for two parties that serve the people, all they've done is destroyed the country. I mean, decades after decades after decades. I mean, prioritising people that are abroad over your UK citizens, putting out injunctions, using taxpayers' money to fund cases to fight the taxpayers has never been heard of. But this Home Office is doing it. It's shocking.
Put yourself in. Just say, for example, if you're back working with the army, or you're in the army, and you were told that there's this conflict about to happen, and you are there to control and do whatever you need to. Obviously you would have the orders above, but there may be Brits killed within Britain. Do you think the army? I mean, I don't know. I presume they wouldn't, but would the army consider basically a mutiny, for example, to say no, we're not going to do this to our own?
Mike, that's actually a great question. As a commander with men on the ground, well, the truth is, unless there's an immediate threat to life, I would never give the order for my men to do anything against its people. The people have a right to protest. If protest turns into violence, then you have to stop that. But I don't think protesters just want to be heard. They want to be heard and they want to be enforced. What they don't want is lines of Met Police and soldiers pushing them back and forcing them, because that shows aggression towards ordinary people. And what normally happens is in these protests, and I've watched it, the police will stand firm. When the Palestinian protesters and people that hate us protest and shout and scream and throw things, the police stand back. But it's when the ordinary protesters which love their country protest, the police team to force themselves onto them. So do you know what? 9 times out of 10, the police, if they do get injured, it's because they're being too aggressive towards ordinary people. I don't think the British Army would ever go against their people. I doubt that very much. What I can see is them refusing to soldier. Now, if a unit refuses to soldier, then how do you cope with that unit? Because the Military Correctional Training Centre in Colchester, the Glass House used to be known as, isn't big enough to house them. So what do you do if a unit refuses to go out onto its own people? The government can't do anything about it other than say, lock the gates, keep them in camp.
It's pretty interesting and pretty wild if you think about it. What would you do to rectify all this at the moment, besides asking government to take a long walk on a short pier?
It's difficult. I don't think that we can solve anything unless the Prime Minister steps down or resigns or is forced out. The truth is he doesn't stand up for his own citizens. He's not doing a good job. He's trying to shut down everything. He's got police forces on social media trawling through people. And like, for instance, I will say this, it wasn't that long ago. Now, I heard that Graham Lynham, the guy that wrote Father Ted, had 5 officers arrest him at Heathrow Airport for something he tweeted online. It was only last January, where I had police officers come to my house and arrest me for things that I'd said. So I understand. I spent 12 hours in custody in Suffolk Police Station because apparently I said things which were offensive. And all I happened to say is, and I'll say it again, was I didn't understand why we were bringing in tens of thousands of Afghan men without checking them properly. Because when I was in Afghanistan working there was a thing called Bajabaki. I'm not going to go into it on your show. And it is something that they do as part of their culture. And over here, it's not accepted. So whenever you force mass migration into a community which practices Bajabaki, you're forcing things onto the people that don't want them. And this will cause uproar. And this is what's happening now. So rather than identify that there's something culturally wrong with people coming into your area that don't accept your way of life, when you speak out about that, it's a hate crime. It's a hate crime to feel as if you don't feel protected. Just bear that in mind.
It's a really bad situation at the moment, and hopefully it will get better. I don't think it will. I think I don't know about the civil war thing, but I think it's going to get a lot more uglier before anything good happens, and that's pending on whether the government decides to do the right thing by its own country, by its own citizens, instead of looking after those that have snuck into their house without the invitation and then become the favoured people. Trev, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Well, at the minute, I haven't been shut down yet, but I do have a YouTube channel, and I do speak out on my YouTube channel. I mean, I have sort of twinned. You know, when you go into towns and cities and you twin, like, for instance, Birmingham twinned with LA and stuff like that. Well, I've twinned London with North Korea this morning, so we'll see how that goes on social media.
It's going to be a very, very interesting time. Trevor Coult MC, thank you very much for your time. This is The World Today.
Be safe, honey.
No matter where you go, always gear up before hitting the road.
Respect road laws and riders, too.
Look twice. Stop early. Stay aware.
Ride safe. Being tough doesn't mean taking risks. Ride smart, share the road, and get home to what matters most.
When you hear the words nonprofit organization, what comes to mind? Is it a place your dog called home before finding you? Is it an organization that supports accessibility? Is it a place that ensures your safety and that of those you love? That protects endangered wildlife and habitats or fights for our most basic needs? It's impossible to show all the ways nonprofit organizations make a difference in our world. One animal, one person, one cause at a time, but it's not impossible to be part of it. When you give what you have to a nonprofit organization that needs what you can give, you help promote, protect, and strengthen the reach of these incredible organizations. The Nonprofit Alliance is here, helping connect people like you to the nonprofits that enrich your life, your community, and the world we share. Reach out to a nonprofit organization that inspires you today to find how you can help make the world a better place.
I start every run with a plan and a promise to stay safe. A big part of my plan is to be alert to drivers and other pedestrians. Whether you're on your feet or behind the wheel, the road belongs to all of us. Every trip, every time, safety first. Alert today, alive tomorrow.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
And back again. We just had a great conversation with Trevor Coult MC. The guy is just an amazing person, and we must have him on many, many more times. Catherine McBride, OBE, she's just about done it all in the economic world, except received the Nobel Peace Prize, but that's going to Donald Trump next. Catherine, we at the moment there seems to be an enormous amount of what will I say, dissent, unhappiness within the UK. Could you also tell us, has that sort of morphed into, say, into the economy, that it's basically on the brink of disaster?
Hi, Mike. It's great to talk to you. And the economy in the UK is not looking very good. Yesterday, we had a sort of palace coup. A lot of people are claiming that Keir Starmer has decided to take over the economic management of the country and take it away from the Chancellor. But I heard another commentator saying, no, actually, the Chancellor is taking over number 10. But they are putting some very strange people into number 10 and 11 to manage our economy, including a politician who became famous a couple of months ago by going on a national thing called Newsnight, or Question Time, I think it was, and declaring that all of the migrants that come to the UK are women and children. And this was howling with laughter the whole country, because these boats are filmed, televised by people on cameras and by the national news, and everyone knows that the boats are full of young men, fighting age men, and yet there's a politician trying to pretend to the world that they're all women and children. And he's now one of the team that's gone in to help run our economy. So I'm much more scared today than I was yesterday or the day before. But we've had a lot of things have gone wrong. Our yield curve has gone up massively in the year since Labor's been in charge, especially at the long end. I mean, under the Conservatives, if we go back to January 2024, it was quite a weird yield curve where our short-term rates were very high and our long-term rates were very low. And all of that has turned around, and we've now found that 10-year gilts have gone up from about 4% to 4.85%. The 30-year gilts, the ones at the back end, have gone from 4.5 to 5.7. So this is the cost of government borrowing. And our government has a problem with spending. They're addicted to it, and they cannot see a way to cut spending. And that is really terrifying. The good news is, yesterday, Richard Tice, I just heard you speaking earlier, you may not appreciate it, but our Reform Party may be the only party out there that can save the UK. They did very well in our local elections, and now they control quite a few councils, and they've been going through the books of the councils and discovered some of the huge spending problems with the council, which includes employing people who are not very good at their job and continuing to employ them, and outsourcing things to people who are not very good at them and continuing to outsource them, paying way over the odds for things. And the biggest scandal that came out yesterday was the amount that they put into people's pensions and the amount they pay the pension managers, even though they're huge accounts. They've never thought of bargaining with the pension managers about the fees they pay. And then it turns out the pension managers that they've been employing have been underperforming the benchmarks set for them. And so the councils keep having to top up these massive pensions that they've awarded all of their workers. And only Reform has looked at the books and said, no, that's not how normal companies work. If you're a massive client, you get a discount on your fees. And if the person you've employed to do the work isn't doing the work, you find someone else to do it. You move the account. So there's a whole lot of crazy things have been going on in not just this government, also in the one before. And it's taken Reform to actually go through the books. So we really need the Labor Party to change their attitude to a lot of things. It's difficult because, as you did rightly say before, all of the people in the Labor Party have never had a real job, run a business. They are student politicians who went into think tanks and then became lawyers or barristers, human rights barristers, not sort of important ones, not commercial barristers. And now they're running the country. And guess what? They're not running it very well.
Yeah, my issue is with Nigel. I truly, my job all my life is I talk to people.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't pass the pub test. He wouldn't pass it. Something doesn't feel quite right. Whether he, you know what our sayings are in Australia. Some say he's a blow-in, and he's gone there for fame and fortune to Reform. And I'm not saying at all. Most of the people would have the UK at heart, but I think until you get a less, not charismatic, less celebrity game show leader, and that's what he reminds me of. I just find him, I don't think he's strong enough. I don't think at the moment, I don't think Reform is strong enough, even though the intentions are right. And I think give it 3 more years, if they're still around. I don't know what sort of state they'll be in. Don't forget they were fracturing also, falling apart. Everyone's setting up their own independent party. So, I mean, I have doubts.
Well, I agree with you, actually, and I think a lot of people in the country do as well. Now, I'll correct you on one thing. Nigel Farage is not a blow-in. He has been fighting the whole EU thing since the Maastricht Treaty was signed by John Major without any vote, without asking the people, without any sort of taking it to a referendum, which he should have done. And so Farage got into the European politics back in like the 90s. He's had more experience in politics than anyone else in the House. Now that people like Bill Cash have resigned at the age of 85, he's a very good politician, but he's also very wary of people, especially journalists, if you were talking to him in a pub, because he did find when they set up UKIP originally, the Conservative Party is more worried about Reform and before that UKIP than they are about Labour. And they have gone out of their way, I think, to undermine them. Now, I say this as someone who's been a Conservative Party member for many years, but I still think that it intrigues me that they are more worried about their right flank than they are about the left. And they're often quite happy with what the Labour Party is doing. In fact, a lot of what the Labour Party is doing now, which is destroying the country, were things that started under the Conservative Party. So I think that the real problem with reform, it has been this division of the group. I felt much more comfortable with them this time last year when they had, obviously, Rupert Lowe was part of the reform team. He's still an MP, but he's now an independent. And they had people like Ben Habib behind the scenes. And that, to me, seemed to be a really coherent group of people with life experience, people who have set up businesses, run businesses, done married children, divorced, married children, whatever. They've done things, they've experienced life, they've had to do all the things that the Labour Party student politicians like to think about without ever having done. I mean, we joke about Angela Rayner, but at least she knows how to get a mortgage. I would say that there's a large number of MPs in the House who've never actually gone and got a mortgage, and then they complain about rentals. And it's, there's a lot to be said for reform, but they have got 3 years to get their policies in order. They are coming up with policies, which the Conservative Party is not doing. And that is good because the policies that Reform was coming up with are very important for the health of the UK economy. I mean, the most important one is their sort of no to net zero. I think that is... The UK has actually killed itself. It's the most extraordinary thing to have gone from a country that had everything going for it in the 80s and even into the 90s, then decided to tie one arm and one leg behind its back. It was extraordinary. We don't have a lot of resources in the UK. It's not like Australia. They don't have a lot of stuff. They've only got fossil fuels. That's it. Coal, oil, and gas. And not only are they not using them themselves, they're not even exporting them. They've got a massive trade deficit, and yet they're sitting on stuff that Australia happily sells to China, where they're trying to pretend that if they just keep cutting their fossil fuel emissions, which they have already cut in half, they have cut them more than any other developed country, and that somehow this will save the planet, when we're now down to 0.85% of the world's emissions, mainly because the world's emissions are getting larger. We now don't have to do anything to become a smaller and smaller percent of the world's emissions, because China and India are increasing by so much each year that the whole emissions gets bigger and our share gets to become a smaller percent. it is a form of insanity. It is like we've got, it's like people with anorexia or something. We've got this crazy thing that we're doing something that's killing ourselves and not noticing. And even the green stuff they have got into, we have a lot of wind. I get the idea of windmills, but we can't make the windmills. We import them. And then they only really work when they get subsidized by government. And when the government tried to lower the subsidies, none of the wind farms wanted to bid for the payments. So there was one, what they call round of subsidies 2 years ago where there were no bids because they said it wasn't high enough. So these guys are really only there to get money out of the government. They're not actually a viable source of energy that stands alone, that can make energy cheap enough where they do it without a subsidy.
Sorry for butting in there. I'm just thinking.
No. Ask questions. Yeah.
No, but we know.
Sorry, I'm just
but
talking.
I mean, you're familiar with the Australian federal government, and that they're sure they get in. They're advised by the bureaucracy, the bureaucrats, the departments, what they should do. The Australian politician isn't that bright at the best of times. And if you look at the Conservatives, say under Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, and then Dutton being opposition, they're really no different than that of Labor. And a lot of the policies they've put into place, that Labor has put into place, were already in place or in the final planning stages by the Conservatives. Yeah. Now, let's just extrapolate, move over to the UK. Of course, it would be fairly similar, I would imagine, that the various departments and the bureaucrats would be advising strongly, very strongly, on what to do. So if you get a new government in place and the government is told, we're broke, this is how you do it, and we have to do it, and if you don't do it, we will end up sinking into the North Sea. What are they going to do? They're going to do exactly as the bureaucrats say, because they're the ones that are telling them they're going to slip quietly into the North Sea. However, if the government has some backbone and says, no, we're not going to do that, then you might have some show. But I don't see that happening. I see the government, whether it's Conservative or Labor, using Australia as the example, as being even footing and basically with the same policies, such as their green policies. I mean, the windmills don't work. Yeah. They don't work, and they cost a lot of money, and they mess up farming.
Well, in the UK, the windmills work, but they work so well they have to turn them off. And when they turn them off,
but what about the land? And in Australia, for example, where they're plonking up all these windmills, the turbines all over the place. It's destroying the farmland. And
No, our problem, we have the same thing happening in the UK, but it's the opposite. Most of our wind turbines are out to sea, which is a problem because they rust, they decay, they're hard to maintain, they're expensive to put in. And so they don't live as long as they're meant to. In the projections of how much money you'll make, you expect the wind turbine to last for 25 years, and they're discovering they are actually not lasting for 25 years. In the UK, we are insanely putting solar panels. It'll make you laugh. You should see the weather outside of my window, and it's only just September. But we put solar panels on farmland in the UK when we have no sun and very limited amounts of farmland. I mean, the UK is a 30th of the size of Australia with over twice the population, and in fact 3 times the population probably. And we pay people to put solar panels on farmland. It's insane. The UK only produces 65% of the food it consumes each year. They are not self-sufficient in food. We have no sun. And we know we have no sun. We joke about having no sun. And yet we pay people to put solar panels on farmland, and we pay them more than they could make as farmers. So therefore, people are doing it. Only the sort of most dedicated farmers are going, no, I won't be a party to that abomination, thank God. But so, yes, it's a very peculiar uni-party thing that has happened in the Western world. And I do blame it on, we've had this situation where all of the Western world kind of bought into net zero, which destroyed their ability to produce things. And then they bought into the COVID lockdowns, and they all printed money to get out of that. And that has killed all of these economies. The few countries that didn't do the COVID lockdown and print money, say Switzerland didn't do the money printing, they did the lockdown. Sweden didn't do the lockdown. They seem to be surviving, where all of the other bright sparks, the smart people, which in both Australia and the UK at the time were the Conservatives, the people who were meant to be good at business, and they went along with this. I mean, our net zero stuff started under the Labor Party when Ed Miliband, who's now is now the Minister for Net Zero and Energy, which is a real energy security, I think it is. He was the energy minister back in 2007 and started this whole decline in the whole economy. And now he's back making it worse. But in the meantime, we had a Conservative government who did not get rid of any of this, even though David Cameron was elected saying he would get rid of what he described as the green crap. And instead, the green crap has just got stronger and stronger and stronger and more expensive. You know, this stuff is not free, you know, and we are paying a huge amount for this, and we're paying people to turn off windmills because we get too much wind. So when the wind's too strong, we pay them to turn off. And I believe in Australia there are places where you get too much sun and you have to pay people to turn off their solar panels.
Your Prime Minister wants to turn the sun off anyway. He wants to throw sulphur around the planet.
That's the energy minister. That he's absolutely lost it. Yeah.
They're all nuts. I mean, they are. And that's what I go back to the bureaucrats. Surely the bureaucrats or the various departments can say, oh, excuse me, sir, we'll have to have you certified if you keep going this way. I mean, truly, this is like a yes minister.
Unfortunately, in the UK, it's the bureaucrats that are egging on the MPs because they know the MPs are stupid. Our MPs are, even the ones that are smart, they'll all show you, oh, I've got a degree from Oxford in PPE or whatever, but they never did science. Very few of them did maths. Most of them are innumerate. They get sort of, when you show them percentages and equations, it's all too complicated. And so they believe anything that is full of numbers because they think, oh, it must be right. You know, they never look at the numbers. They never check things. And a huge number of the people employed in the public service will then leave the public service and get employed by some of the businesses who are benefiting hugely from running wind farms, putting solar panels on land, in charge of government quangos. There's huge private companies, private equity that is supplying government services that are getting these contracts from government. So people like to complain about the number of migrants living in 4-star hotels, which started under the Conservatives and continued under the Labor Party. But that is organised by a private company who goes to hotels and says, we will pay you for 100% occupancy for 5 years. And in most hotels around the world, they never have 100% occupancy except in their really highest season. So if you're by the seaside, you might get that at the height of summer, but in the winter, you're down at 0.5% occupancy, which is often why they then have conferences or they try and do things to get people in. But suddenly here's a company whose bills are being picked up by the government just giving the company money, so they are just sloshing it around. They have no interest in even saying to the hotel, well, we'll give you 75% occupancy. We'll take the whole hotel and we'll pay you what you'd get if you had 75% occupancy all year round. Most hotels would probably get into that. They go, yeah, that's fair. That's more than we're going to make. You know, here, you take the hotel, we'll leave. But they're not even doing that. They're just giving them 100% of the money. So the hotels are going, yeah, sure. And then the local residents are getting upset, going, hang on a minute, we're meant to be living near a hotel that is used occasionally, busy in summer, not so busy in the winter. Suddenly, full-time, a whole lot of illegal people here who we don't know who they are. Some of them probably really nice. Some of them are definitely not, and they've been charged with crimes. And, you know, it's a ridiculous situation. As an economist, I look at the cost and go, are you kidding? You know, like they're living in tents in France. And now it gets worse and worse every day. It's like we're living now in 1984. President Macron in France, who's been paid money to stop the boats coming to the UK, has just pocketed the cash and encouraged the boats to come. But now he's claiming the reason they come is because they can work illegally in the UK and they can't work illegally in France because in France everyone has an ID card. So he's now saying we have to have an ID card, and our government is using this as an excuse to give everyone an ID card. And it's like, well, yeah, that's probably a thing, but most of them don't actually need to work because you're putting them up in 4-star hotels and paying for all their food and paying for their dental and their medical. They get everything. They get everything that most people in the UK can't afford are given to illegal immigrants. These are not even the people we want in the country. They're not people who are going to come and work in the NHS or be teachers or something good. These are illegal immigrants who probably could only ever be an Uber driver anyhow, if they've got a driving license, which most of them probably don't have. But they're coming to the UK and they're living a life of luxury. And here's Macron going, oh, you've got to stop them working. We're going, we don't actually let them work and they don't need to work because we give them everything, you know. They're at home watching Netflix, you know.
Look at Macron. I mean, I'm sorry, he's an idiot. I mean, but his wife, and she has some very manly attributes apparently, but she keeps him under her thumb. We do have to go, but I'm just thinking I mean, we were supposed to talk about economics. We got on to more exciting things from my point of view.
I'm sorry.
Just very briefly, because we're going way over time, very briefly. Are you able, no, that's fantastic. It's my fault. I'm guilty. Are you able just to very briefly tell us what your thoughts are on the future for the UK economically?
Economically, I think this is not just a UK thing, it's the Western world. Everyone's seeing the cost of borrowing long term has gone up a lot in the last year. And I think that's because there's two complications here. When I was working in the city of London, where I worked for many, many years, if someone rang and said, why is something going up or down, you'd usually say more buyers than sellers or more sellers than buyers, whatever. And that is kind of the case here. I joked about it the other day, and then I thought about it. And one of the big buyers for bonds in the Western world used to be China. And people used to get worried about the amount of debt that people like the great exporting countries, India, China, you know, they get left with a lot of your currency when they sell you goods. You're paying for them in pounds. They often invest those pounds in hard assets or in gilts. And they're not doing so well anymore. We're not buying as many of their goods. They don't have as much money to buy. So there is just a pretty simple, not even a buyer's strike, though there may be a buyer's strike. The Chinese may have said, don't buy any bonds for a while, show them how important we are to them. But it's more likely they're going, well, we're not selling the cars to the UK. They don't want to buy them. They're putting tariffs on them. therefore we won't have extra cash to buy their bonds. So there is not as many buyers out there. But I think that there is hope for the UK if we get some radical people into government, like the things I'm hearing from Reform. But there's also another group called Advance, which has been set up, who are doing some interesting things. Even a group called the SDP that came out of the sort of liberal, the old Jeremy Thorpe Liberal Party and some Labour levers. They're talking interesting things. There are other parties out there, and I think we may find what happened to France when Macron got in, and he's not a good example because he turned out to be a bigger idiot than the people he replaced. But both the left and the right traditional parties in France virtually disappeared in that election. They both dropped to sort of 7% of the vote, and Macron came through the middle and got a huge majority just because he was not either of the main parties. Because as you say, both main parties are coming up with the same ideas.
They are, yeah.
With listening to the same people, and they're not thinking, not getting the smart people. Because Australia had some really smart people on the Labor side as well. You know, the Labor Party did a lot of good things for Australia in the 80s and 90s, and then the Liberal Party did some great things in the 90s as well, you know. So, you know, you've had smart people on both sides of the aisle, and that seems to have gone away now, especially in the UK.
It has.
Yeah.
I think we're in deep trouble. We have run out of time, way overdue.
Yeah, way overdue. Yeah.
But a fantastic conversation. If somebody wants to find out more about what you do, how do they do that?
I am on Substack now. It's called Catherine McBride Substack. It's very simple. And I try and put something out once a week. I'm on Twitter all the time at @CMacB. And I'm also writing for Briefings for Britain and possibly joining a new think tank soon, but who's going to try and solve these problems. But I'll have to tell you more about that in another time, Mike.
Look forward to that very much. Thank you very much for your time. Catherine McBride, OBE, who's a free market economist and truly makes an enormous amount of sense. This is The World Today.